I never imagined that a split-second decision could change my entire life and the lives of so many others. That day, I simply chose to stop and help an elderly man who seemed lost in our company's lobby. I had no idea that moment would uncover a long-buried secret and pull me into the heart of a reunion that left everyone speechless. The morning sun poured through the massive glass windows of Aurora's headquarters, casting long streaks of light across the polished marble floor. From a distance, the lobby looked like a scene from a magazine cover, sleek, modern, buzzing with energy. To everyone else, it was an exciting place to work, a symbol of innovation and ambition. To me, it felt like a stage where I didn't quite belong. My role at Aurora was temporary, just a 3-month assistant contract while I tried to figure out my next step in life. Most of my tasks were menial, scheduling meetings, running errands, refilling the coffee machine. On paper, it didn't sound so bad, but in reality, it felt like I was invisible, just another interchangeable piece in a giant corporate machine. That morning, I sat at the edge of a crowded conference room, my laptop open, my notes carefully prepared. I'd spent hours researching a small suggestion I thought could help streamline our workflow. As the meeting progressed, I waited for the right moment to speak. My heart pounded as I finally raised my hand and began to explain my idea, only to be cut off mid-sentence. "Moving on," someone said, talking right over me as if I hadn't spoken at all. A ripple of polite laughter followed, and my voice disappeared beneath it. I closed my mouth, cheeks burning, and stared down at my hands. No one even noticed my silence. As I sat there, a memory flashed before me. High school Emily, confident and outspoken, leading community projects and rallying her friends with a bright smile. Back then, I'd believed my voice mattered, but somewhere between college and my first few jobs, that belief had crumbled piece by piece. The meeting ended and people filtered out with practiced smiles and quick goodbyes. As I gathered my things, 2 coworkers passed by, laughing and mimicking hand signs in an exaggerated, clumsy way. I recognized the shapes immediately. They were attempting American Sign Language. My heart sank. They weren't trying to communicate. They were making a joke. I bit my lip, forcing a small, polite smile as I slipped past them. They had no idea how much those little gestures hurt. It wasn't just about them being rude. It was about the sinking realization that the skill I valued most, the language that connected me to someone I loved, was treated here as nothing more than a punchline. Walking back to my desk, I tucked that pain deep inside. This was Aurora, after all. And in Aurora, there was no room for someone like me to truly be seen. By the time I left the Aurora building that evening, my chest felt tight, as though I'd been holding my breath all day. The moment I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I let it out in a long sigh and headed toward the bus stop. My favorite part of every day wasn't in that office, surrounded by glass walls and endless jargon. It was coming home to Leo. Leo is my little brother, 10 years old and endlessly curious. He's been deaf since birth, and for as long as I can remember, our conversations have always been in ASL. While other kids his age shout to be heard, Leo communicates through quick, graceful movements of his hands and bright, expressive eyes that seem to speak louder than words ever could. When I walked through the front door of our small apartment, the first thing I saw was Leo sprawled on the living room rug, building a lopsided Lego tower. The moment he noticed me, his face lit up. He signed rapidly. "You're home! Did you see the picture I drew?" I grinned and knelt beside him, answering with my hands. "I did not. Show me." He scrambled to grab a sheet of paper and proudly held it up. It was a colorful drawing of us, Leo and me, standing beneath a giant building that vaguely resembled Aurora's headquarters. In the picture, I wore a cape like a superhero. "You think I'm a superhero?" I signed, pretending to look shocked. Leo nodded vigorously, his laughter silent but contagious. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small braided bracelet made of thin blue thread. He signed, "I made this for you, so you'll think of me at work." The bracelet was simple, almost fragile, but as I slipped it onto my wrist, it felt like the most precious thing I owned. I hugged him tightly, my throat aching with emotion. Later, as I tucked Leo into bed, I caught myself staring at the bracelet. I loved ASL because it connected me to Leo in a way words never could. And yet, outside this apartment, it felt utterly useless. At work, no one needed it. No one cared. Still, as I sat beside my sleeping brother, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way, someday, to make this skill matter. Maybe even change how the world saw people like Leo. But for now, it remained only a quiet hope, tucked away like a secret dream. The next morning, Aurora's headquarters felt different, charged, almost electric. From the moment I stepped inside, I could sense the tension. Conversations were clipped, footsteps quick and sharp. Everywhere I looked, people were rushing about with a kind of nervous precision, clutching tablets and folders like shields. Today was the day of a massive pitch to a group of influential investors. For weeks, the entire company had been preparing for this moment. Even the lobby, usually a calm space, now buzzed like a beehive. At the center of it all was a massive digital screen displaying a countdown timer, SOR 4217. The red numbers glowed like a silent warning, ticking away toward the start of the presentation. Every time I glanced at it, my pulse quickened. I was weaving my way through the crowd when Monica, my manager, appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. She was dressed sharply, her expression as tight as the knot in her scarf. "Emily," she snapped, pressing a file into my hands. "We're missing the final handouts for the investor kits. Print these, collate them, and get them to the conference room immediately. No mistakes." Before I could reply, she was gone, already barking orders at someone else. I hugged the folder to my chest and hurried toward the copy room, my mind racing. Every second felt heavier than the last. If I messed this up, I wouldn't just look incompetent. I might jeopardize the entire event. As I turned the corner near the front desk, something caught my eye. An older man standing near the reception area, his posture stiff, his eyes darting around like a lost child. He held a worn leather notebook and looked utterly out of place amid the sleek, frantic environment. He opened his mouth, tried to speak to the receptionist, then stopped, frustration flickering across his face. The receptionist offered a polite but blank smile, clearly unsure how to help. I slowed my steps, torn. The countdown screen loomed in my peripheral vision. 003952. I had a critical task to finish and no time to waste. Yet something about the man's bewildered expression tugged at me. A quiet voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, this moment mattered too. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, my mind split in two. Monica's voice echoed in my head, sharp and commanding. "No mistakes!" If I didn't deliver those handouts on time, she would never let me forget it. My temporary position was already hanging by a thread. One misstep could easily become the end of my time at Aurora. But then I looked at the older man again. His shoulders were tense, his hands hovering in midair like he wanted to express something, but couldn't find a way to make himself understood. The receptionist was speaking slowly and loudly, her words exaggerated, but he just frowned and shook his head. A small crowd began to form, people sneaking glances as they passed by, their expressions a mixture of pity and annoyance. My heart squeezed. I knew that feeling, being surrounded by people yet utterly alone. I glanced at the countdown screen again. 003821. The numbers ticked down mercilessly. Then I made my choice. I veered away from the copy room and approached the man, gently touching his arm to get his attention. His startled eyes met mine, wide and a little wary. Slowly, I lifted my hands and signed, "Hello, are you okay? Do you need help?" For a second, he just stared. Then his entire face transformed. His rigid posture softened, and a tentative smile spread across his lips, fragile at first, then full of relief. He signed back, haltingly but clearly. "Yes, thank you. I can't find my son." I nodded, my own smile growing. "I can help. Don't worry. You're safe here." Behind me, I could feel the weight of curious stares. A couple of coworkers exchanged puzzled looks, whispering to each other. To them, I must have looked strange. waving my hands in some private dance while the clock ticked toward one of the most important moments in Aurora's history. My cheeks burned, but I kept my focus on the man in front of me. His relief was unmistakable, and in that moment, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. Sometimes doing the right thing meant stepping out of line, no matter how many people didn't understand why. As we exchanged a few more signs, I asked him for his son's name and description, trying to piece together what was going on. His hands moved carefully, with a grace that reminded me of Leo when he was trying very hard to be understood.
Adrian,
he signed slowly. Tall, dark hair, works here. The words made me pause for a fraction of a second. Adrian. The name was familiar. I'd heard it countless times whispered in hallways, spoken reverently in meetings. Aurora's CEO. Surely it couldn't be the same person. I pointed toward the elevators and signed. Let's go to the main floor. We'll find him together. He nodded gratefully and slipped his worn leather notebook under his arm. As we walked, I could feel eyes following us. Some employees stared outright, their expressions unreadable. The receptionist, who earlier had looked so helpless, now watched with wide-eyed surprise, as though realizing too late that the man she couldn't understand wasn't just anyone. When we reached the edge of the lobby, a flurry of movement erupted near the presentation hall. A tall man in a tailored suit strode out, exuding authority and focus. I recognized him instantly from company announcements and press articles. Adrian Wallace, our elusive CEO. Dad? Adrian's voice cracked slightly as he rushed forward, breaking the professional mask he always wore. The older man, Henry, I now realized, lit up with unspoken emotion. His hands moved in rapid signs that I instinctively translated. I was looking for you. I couldn't find anyone who understood me. Adrian froze for half a beat, then fumbled awkwardly through a few signs of his own. They were clumsy, hesitant, but heartfelt. I'm here. I'm sorry. The crowd around us shifted uneasily, their previous indifference giving way to sudden deference. Whispers rippled through the lobby as realization dawned. This wasn't just some confused visitor. This was the CEO's father. I stood silently beside them, my pulse hammering in my ears. My simple choice to stop and help had just changed everything. Not only for this man and his son, but though I didn't know it yet, for the entire company. And for me. The chaos of the lobby slowly settled after Adrian embraced his father. Employees dispersed, whispering among themselves, casting curious glances my way as they returned to their tasks. I stood awkwardly to the side, clutching my hands together, unsure if I should stay or slip away quietly. Adrian turned to me, his expression softened now, gratitude shining through his usual air of authority. Emily, he said, his voice lower, gentler. Thank you for everything. Would you mind showing my father around while I prepare for the presentation? I don't want him to feel lost here. I nodded quickly, my throat tight. Of course, I signed and spoke at the same time so Henry could see. His eyes lit up, and he reached for his notebook like it was an old habit. So began our unexpected tour. We started at the entrance, where a glossy directory hung on the wall. I pointed out the different floors and departments, translating each sign into ASL. Henry followed my hands intently, his gaze sharp and curious. As we moved deeper into the building, I described the work being done in each section. Sleek labs filled with prototypes, brainstorming areas covered in colorful notes, and quiet spaces where engineers hunched over glowing screens. Aurora was a marvel of modern innovation, and yet, as I walked beside Henry, I began to notice cracks I'd never truly seen before. Emergency alarms without flashing lights, instructions posted only in text with no visuals or symbols, interactive kiosks that required voice commands but offered no alternative for someone who couldn't hear. Every detail seemed to leap out at me now, stark and undeniable. I watched Henry's face as we passed these things. He never complained, never frowned, but his eyes would dim just slightly, like a door closing silently inside him. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about one man feeling left out. It was a reflection of how many people were invisible here, just like I often felt. As we approached the expansive glass windows overlooking the city, Henry touched my arm lightly, signing with a small, grateful smile.
Thank you for taking the time.
I smiled back, but inside, something deeper began to stir, a quiet spark of realization I couldn't yet name. As we walked down one of the quieter hallways, Henry slowed his pace, his gaze drifting to the framed photographs lining the wall. Each image captured a milestone in Aurora's history, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, celebrations of towering achievements. His fingers brushed lightly against the edge of one frame, and when he turned to me, there was a wistfulness in his eyes that went beyond simple admiration. He signed slowly, his movements deliberate.
I used to be an engineer. Construction.
My hands paused midair in surprise. You built things? I signed back, my face lighting up. Henry nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. As we walked, he began to share fragments of his past, how he had worked on bridges and high-rises, structures that shaped entire skylines. His hands danced with a precision born of decades of work, his silent storytelling painting vivid images in my mind. When he described standing atop a steel beam 100 feet above the ground, I could almost feel the rush of wind, hear the echo of tools clanging in the distance. His eyes shone with pride as he recounted those days, but just as quickly, that pride dimmed. His shoulders slumped, and his movement slowed. He signed softly.
After my wife passed, everything felt empty. Adrian buried himself in work. I didn't know how to reach him.
A lump formed in my throat. I could see the weight of years in his expression, the silence between father and son growing heavier, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to bridge the gap. Then Henry reached into his coat pocket and carefully unfolded a worn piece of paper. It was a sketch, faded with age, of a small house with a garden in the back. In the corner was a note written in a boy's handwriting. "Someday, we'll build this together." My breath caught. This wasn't just a drawing, it was a promise. Henry held the paper for a moment, his hands trembling slightly before folding it back and tucking it away. The unspoken words between us hung in the air, heavy and tender, as we continued down the hall in thoughtful silence. We reached the far end of the building, where a row of tall glass windows overlooked the city skyline. The afternoon light streamed through, bathing the space in a warm, golden glow. Henry paused by the window, taking in the view with a quiet reverence. His hands moved slowly as he signed.
"Beautiful. Adrian built all of this."
I translated softly, glancing at Henry's reflection in the glass. There was pride there, yes, but also a deep ache that no words, or signs, could fully express. What Henry didn't see was the figure standing several yards behind us. Adrian had returned earlier than expected, slipping into the corridor without a word. He stayed back, watching us, his posture tense at first, then gradually softening. From my position, I could see both father and son at once. Henry signing animatedly, his face alight as he shared a story about one of his old bridge projects, and Adrian standing motionless, his jaw tight, his eyes glimmering with something raw and unguarded. Adrian's hands twitched slightly at his sides. Almost without thinking, he began to mimic a few of the signs I used. The motions were clumsy, uncertain, as if he'd practiced them alone, in secret. A single sign, "Father," came out shaky but recognizable. My breath caught. He was trying. Even if Henry couldn't see it yet, Adrian was reaching out in his own silent way. I continued translating for Henry, my voice steady even as my heart swelled. The more I spoke, the more I understood just how vast the distance between them had grown and how desperately they both wanted to close it. After a few minutes, Adrian stepped back into the shadows, unseen by his father. I caught his eye for a brief second, and something passed between us. Gratitude, maybe, or resolve. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving Henry blissfully unaware of his presence. As Henry and I continued the tour, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. It was like watching two sides of a bridge that hadn't yet been built, each waiting for the other to take the first step. And for the first time, I felt certain that I was meant to help them find their way across. As the tour came to an end, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Henry was smiling, his eyes bright with the kind of energy I hadn't seen when we first met. For a moment, it felt like we'd built a small bridge together, one conversation at a time. I was just about to walk him back to the lobby when Monica's sharp voice sliced through the air like a cold wind. "Emily!" she barked, her heels striking the floor in rapid, angry clicks. She marched toward me, her perfectly pressed suit radiating authority and impatience. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what's going on right now?" The warmth from Henry's smile faded instantly. I turned, startled, my hands automatically clasping in front of me. Monica, You were gone." She cut me off, her tone loud enough to draw a crowd. Several co-workers paused mid-step, pretending to check their phones while obviously eavesdropping. "When I give you a task, I expect you to follow through. Those handouts were supposed to be ready 10 minutes ago. Do you understand the stakes here? This pitch could make or break the company." I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment. Henry looked between us, confused, his brow furrowed as he tried to read the situation. I wanted to explain to Monica, to tell her why I'd stayed with him, but my throat tightened. "I was helping." My voice wavered, barely audible over the pounding in my ears. "Helping?" Monica's laugh was sharp and humorless. "This isn't a charity, Emily. This is Aurora. We don't have time for distractions." Whispers rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. I caught snippets of words. Irresponsible, temporary assistant, probably fired. Each one landed like a pebble in my chest, weighing me down. My hands trembled as I tried again. "Please, if you'd just listen." Monica crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing to slits. "No excuses. If you can't handle a simple assignment, maybe you're not cut out for this place." I swallowed hard, the sting of her words burning. Around me, the circle of onlookers tightened, their silence louder than any applause. I felt utterly alone, unsure if I'd done the right thing or ruined everything. Monica's words echoed in my ears, sharp and humiliating. My chest constricted as I opened my mouth, desperate to defend myself, when suddenly a commanding voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That's enough!" The crowd parted almost instinctively as Adrian strode into the lobby. His presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Conversations died mid-sentence, and even Monica straightened, her anger faltering for a brief moment. "Adrian," she said quickly, forcing a tight smile. "I was just addressing a serious issue. This assistant abandoned her post during a critical moment. We can't afford—" "No," Adrian interrupted, his tone calm but unyielding. "You don't have the full story." My breath caught. Henry, standing silently beside me, watched his son with wide, searching eyes. Adrian's gaze softened when it fell on his father. "My dad wasn't lost because he's forgetful or careless," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "He was lost because no one here could communicate with him, except for Emily." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Monica's jaw tightened, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through her confident facade. Adrian took a step closer, his voice dropping but still firm. "This isn't about one person failing at their job. It's about an entire system that overlooks people like my father. We've built a company focused on innovation, yet we couldn't offer him the simplest form of connection." Then, slowly, he turned back to Henry. His hands rose, trembling slightly, and he began to sign. The movements were awkward and halting, but they carried unmistakable sincerity. "Dad, I'm here. I'm sorry." Henry's lips parted in shock. Tears welled in his eyes as he reached out, his own hands responding fluently, his signs sharp and full of emotion. The onlookers fell utterly silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. Monica lowered her gaze, her earlier fury replaced by something closer to shame. I stood rooted to the spot, my heart pounding. The space between father and son wasn't empty anymore. It was alive with words spoken without sound, yet louder than anything I'd ever heard, and I knew this was only the beginning. For a moment, time seemed to stop. I watched as Henry's hands moved swiftly, his emotions spilling through every gesture.
I thought you didn't care anymore.
He signed, his chest heaving with the force of unspoken years.
I thought I lost you.
Adrian's eyes glistened as he signed back, haltingly but with fierce determination.
Never. I didn't know how. I was afraid of failing you.
Henry let out a trembling breath that sounded almost like a sob. He took a step forward, his hands still flying.
All I wanted was to understand you, to share your world, even if just for a moment.
Adrian's composure broke. In 2 strides, he closed the space between them and wrapped his arms around his father. The embrace was fierce, desperate, and years overdue. A stunned silence fell over the lobby. Every employee present stood frozen, witnessing a reunion so raw and personal it felt sacred. Then, slowly, a sound broke the stillness, a single pair of hands clapping. It was hesitant at first, almost shy. Another joined in, then another, until a ripple of applause filled the air like a rising tide. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman discreetly wipe away tears. Others shifted uncomfortably, clearly moved, but unsure how to process what they were seeing. I swallowed hard, emotions swelling in my own throat. I had been part of this moment, however small my role. As the applause faded, Adrian turned slightly, still holding Henry's shoulder. His voice was steady now, though thick with emotion.
This company prides itself on vision and progress,
he said, glancing around the room.
But today, my father reminded me of something simple and essential. Progress means nothing if we leave people behind.
Henry squeezed his son's hand, their silent language mingling with spoken words. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. This was the kind of moment that changed people. Not just the 2 men at its center, but everyone who witnessed it. And though I didn't know it yet, it was about to change me too, in ways I never could have imagined. The applause in the lobby had faded, but the emotions still clung to me like a second skin. My heart was still racing as Adrian gently placed a hand on his father's shoulder and turned to me. His voice was calm, almost tender now. "Emily, would you join us upstairs? I think we all need to talk." I nodded, still reeling from everything that had just happened. The elevator ride to the top floor was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of machinery. Henry stood between us, holding his worn leather notebook close to his chest. His fingers tapped lightly against it, as if grounding himself. When the doors opened, we stepped into Adrian's office, a space of glass and light with a breathtaking view of the city sprawling beneath us. Gone was the commanding CEO who'd silenced a room with a single word. Here, Adrian seemed human. A son, stripped of titles and expectations. He motioned for us to sit on the plush gray chairs arranged in a circle. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Adrian exhaled slowly and began.
"My dad has been here before,"
he said, his voice thick with something unspoken.
"More than once, and every single time, he was met with blank stares, confusion, or polite smiles that didn't mean a thing. Not because people didn't care, but because no one knew how to communicate with him."
Henry's eyes flickered, the pain in them sharp and unmistakable. I translated Adrian's words, my own throat tightening as I watched Henry's hands clench around the notebook. Adrian turned to me, his expression heavy with regret.
"I thought I was protecting him by keeping him away from the chaos of this company. But really, I was avoiding the truth."
He paused, his gaze dropping to his hands.
"I've been absent, Emily. Even when I was physically here, I wasn't really here with him."
Henry reached out, touching Adrian's arm gently. His fingers moved with a tenderness that broke my heart.
"You tried,"
he signed softly.
"I know you did."
Adrian's voice wavered.
"I've been learning ASL in secret, late at night after work, but every time I thought about using it, I froze. I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to fail him again."
Henry's tears spilled over, his hands trembling as he signed back.
"You never failed me. You just stayed silent."
And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just witnessing a conversation. I was witnessing a wound finally begin to heal. Silence settled over the room after Henry's words, thick and reverent. I sat frozen in my chair, hardly daring to breathe. The vulnerability between father and son felt so raw, so intimate, that I almost felt like an intruder. Then Adrian turned toward me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, gratitude mixed with determination.
"Emily,"
he said, his voice steady now.
"Today wouldn't have happened without you."
I blinked, startled. I just did what anyone would have done. Adrian gave a small, knowing smile.
"No,"
he said firmly, shaking his head.
"Most people didn't. My father has been invisible here for years. Not out of malice, but out of neglect. People didn't see him. Not really. You did."
My throat tightened. I thought of the way my coworkers had laughed at my ASL, how invisible I'd felt in that conference room, and for the first time, I realized Henry and I weren't so different. Adrian stood, pacing slowly as he spoke.
"This company is built on innovation. We create products that change lives, yet we've completely overlooked the very people who need us most. Today made that painfully clear to me." He stopped and faced me directly, his expression resolute. "I want to change that, and I want you to help me do it."
My breath caught. Help you? How? He took a deep breath, then said,
"I'm creating a new position, Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. It's never existed here before,
and I want you to be the one to lead it." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My mind reeled. Just hours ago, I'd been terrified Monica would fire me. Now Adrian was offering me a role so monumental, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. "Me?" I whispered. I'm just a temp. I don't have the experience or the authority."
Adrian stepped closer, his voice warm but firm. "What you have can't be taught in a seminar or a management course. You have empathy, insight, and the courage to act when others look away. That's exactly what this company needs."
Tears blurred my vision. I nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. Later, as I slipped into a quiet corner and called Leo, my voice trembled with emotion. "Leo," I said softly, "I think I've finally found a way to make ASL matter. Not just for us, but for so many others." On the other end of the line, his silent joy radiated through the connection, and for the first time, my future felt wide open. Once the first wave of changes had been implemented, it was time to take the next, more ambitious step. I knew this phase would be harder. Real transformation never came without resistance. We launched the rollout in structured stages. The very first step was introducing ASL interpreters at all major company events. At the next quarterly meeting, an interpreter stood beside the speaker, translating every word with precision and grace. For the first time, employees who relied on visual language could truly follow the conversation in real time. I noticed a few surprised faces in the crowd, people who had never realized how much they'd been leaving others behind. The second stage focused on training every department in inclusive communication. We held workshops where employees learned not only basic ASL signs, but also how to create an environment where everyone felt seen and valued. Some were eager to participate, curious and open-minded. Others were hesitant, their expressions guarded, unsure why this was necessary. We also began standardizing company communication. Emails, meeting notes, and instructions were rewritten in clear, accessible language. Visual guides were added to documents. A new anonymous feedback channel was introduced so employees could share their experiences and suggestions without fear of judgment. It wasn't smooth sailing. During one session, a senior employee named Carl stood up abruptly, his voice sharp with frustration. "This is all unnecessary," he said, folding his arms. "It's a waste of time and money. We've been fine without these changes for years." The room went silent. My heart pounded, but I met his gaze steadily. "Carl," I said softly, "my first day here, I felt invisible. My skills didn't matter. My voice didn't matter. Imagine feeling that way every single day of your career. Then I told him about Henry, the CEO's father, wandering lost in his own son's company, unable to ask for help. I watched Carl's posture shift, his arms loosening just slightly. By the end of the session, Carl didn't say another word. But later, I noticed him practicing a few signs with a coworker in the break room. It was a small step, yet it felt like a quiet victory. The change was spreading, one heart at a time. The progress we made with the deaf and hard of hearing community was only the beginning. Once those initiatives were in place, I realized how many other voices still weren't being heard. Accessibility wasn't just about one group, it was about everyone who had ever felt excluded. The next phase of our plan focused on expanding that circle of inclusion. We started by redesigning the physical workspace itself. Narrow hallways were widened, heavy doors replaced with automatic ones, and new desks were installed that could adjust to different heights, making them accessible for people using wheelchairs. In every corner of the building, we added clear signage with high-contrast colors and braille, ensuring that directions were no longer a guessing game for those with limited vision. Technology upgrades followed. Aurora's software team worked side by side with outside consultants to integrate screen reading tools for visually impaired employees. We also introduced keyboard navigation shortcuts and added customizable display settings so those with color blindness or visual strain could adjust their screens to their needs. But we didn't stop there. Recruitment became a priority. Aurora partnered with local organizations that supported job seekers with disabilities, creating internship and mentorship programs. For the first time, our hiring panels included advocates trained to recognize and dismantle biases. To celebrate these sweeping changes, we organized Aurora's first ever Accessibility Day, a company-wide event designed to build empathy. Employees participated in immersive activities, navigating hallways blindfolded, using wheelchairs to understand mobility challenges, and attempting group exercises while relying solely on nonverbal communication. Laughter mixed with quiet reflection filled the air as people experienced firsthand what it meant to adapt. Henry attended the event, standing proudly beside Adrian as they watched the employees engage. When I caught Henry's eye, he gave me a small nod that spoke volumes. Adrian was there too, mingling with staff, his presence warm and approachable rather than distant and intimidating. As the day came to a close, we gathered for a group photo. Looking around, I saw a company transformed, not just in infrastructure, but in spirit. Aurora wasn't perfect yet, but for the first time, it felt like a place where everyone could belong, and I knew deep down that this was only the beginning of what we could build together. 6 months later, I stood backstage at a grand auditorium, the kind of place I never imagined I'd ever see from this angle. My palms were damp as I smoothed the fabric of my dress, staring out at the packed audience beyond the heavy curtains. The stage was set for Aurora's proudest moment yet, accepting a national award for excellence in accessibility and inclusion. The journey here felt almost unreal. I thought back to that first day when I was just a temporary assistant hiding in the shadows, terrified of speaking up. Now, the entire room buzzed with anticipation, not for a product launch or a sales milestone, but to celebrate a cultural transformation that had started with one small act of kindness. Adrian stood beside me, his posture straight but his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. On his other side was Henry, holding his ever-present notebook. When the announcer called our names, we stepped out into the spotlight together. The applause was thunderous. I blinked against the bright lights as we walked to the center of the stage. Adrian accepted the award, a gleaming crystal plaque, then turned to address the crowd. "This," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "is more than recognition for a company. It's proof that true progress comes when we choose to see each other." His gaze found mine, and he added, "None of this would have been possible without Emily. She didn't just bridge a gap, she built an entirely new foundation for how we connect." My throat tightened as the audience erupted into cheers. Henry reached for my hand and signed, "Proud of you." My chest swelled with emotion. Then I spotted a familiar face near the front row. Leo. His eyes were wide, shining with excitement. The moment the ceremony ended, he rushed onto the stage and threw his arms around me. Laughing silently, he slipped a new bracelet onto my wrist, this one woven with gold and blue threads.
For your new chapter.
He signed with a grin. Later, at home, I placed the bracelet beside an old photograph on my desk. Me, Adrian, and Henry from our very first accessibility day. As I looked at it, I realized a single choice to stop and help a lost man had sparked a movement. One small action can ignite a change bigger than we ever imagined.